Welcome to Summary Judgments, Understanding Illinois Personal Injury Litigation and Beyond with Mark P. Loftus.
Hey there, today we're joined by Mark P. Loftus, a seasoned attorney with decades of experience in personal injury, employment law, and more. Mark's dedication to his clients is exemplified by his impressive track record and settlements. Mark, great to see you again.
Hi, Kevin. Good to see you again.
All right, so today we're talking about car accident cases. How common are severe car accidents on Illinois roadways?
Real common, unfortunately, especially with the advent of the smartphone where everybody has an opportunity to be distracted. So they are unfortunately very, very, very common. I see a lot of them. Yeah,
and then I suppose this, the screens on cars now too, and there's just so much going on in front of you to distract you from what you should be doing.
The advent of the smartphone, opened up many years ago. It's a common portion of deposition questioning now, but now years ago when there were no smartphones, you didn't ask somebody, hey, were you on your phone? Were you texting? Were you looking at something on your phone? And it has become increasingly common now where defendant drivers sometimes say, no, I wasn't using my phone, not knowing that those of us on the plaintiff side of the bar can get their phone records and can determine if, in fact, they were on the phone. I've had cases where defendants have testified, I was not using my phone, I wasn't texting, and I subpoenaed the phone records, and in fact, they were texting. So
we talked before. I'm originally from Chicago myself, and I remember the driving out there can be pretty intense. Do you find that there's more serious accidents in the city or more outside of the city?
Probably equally divided. Okay. The last several automobile accident cases I've had, one was in the west suburbs, another was downtown. So it's across the board.
Yeah, across the board. I always felt like there was some sort of organized chaos in the city, like that people just kind of understood everyone was kind of driving a little nutso and they could figure it out. And then I'd get out onto the highway or out into the suburbs or something, and I'd have a harder time. Like it felt like people were doing stuff that was worse, almost like out in the sticks when you're on the highway. Like I don't know why, that just always seemed that way to me. Maybe I just got comfortable driving in the city.
I think that may be true. If you drive in the city of Chicago, you have to be on your toes everywhere, but you really have to be on your toes in the city. Although you raise a good point with the highway driving. I had a case many years ago where my client was badly injured in an automobile accident on the highway where he rear-ended the other driver. The firm that I was at the time took the case, and a lot of us were scratching our heads as to why we took the case, and I ended up trying it. And during the discovery phase of the case, it became apparent that the driver that we sued, who's a physician, oddly enough, had been having, and it was a very nice imported car, had been having regular issues with the car where it would simply die and stop. The engine would cut out. She had been having these problems repeatedly and hadn't addressed them. And what happened that day is that there was a couple cars between my client and her, and he was driving a reasonable speed, and these other cars got out of the way because they could see this other car was struggling, and he rear-ended her, and it became apparent at trial that she had been having this ongoing problem and decided to take the car on the road. And I thought a jury would find that to be irresponsible behavior, and they did.
That seems negligent to me.
Yeah, and for someone, for a physician, somebody should know better.
What are the most common cases you see in the automobile car accident world?
Well, they run the gamut. I mean, it could be, blowing a red light, going through stop sign. It's virtually any circumstance you could think of. It amazes me how every case presents a new version of things you shouldn't do to me. In other words, I see things that people shouldn't do when they're driving, and they keep thinking of new and creative ways to ignore the rules of the road.
And to your point earlier, like the cell phones smartphones have made it exponentially worse too. We all see it when we're behind somebody and we're like, what is wrong with this person? And you go alongside them and they've just got their phone up and they're staring at it.
I'm stunned by the number of people I see on the highway where as I pass them, I look over and I can see them.
Oh, yeah. You see the up and down of their head, or you just see it in their hand, just sitting there, and they're just, I know. It's really, it's a big problem. No doubt about it.
I've handled a fair share of pedestrian cases too. People where I just initiated another lawsuit where My client's a lovely lady it was in the suburbs, crossing a crosswalk, bright, sunny day, waves to the driver and points to the crosswalk and indicates she's walking her bike and indicates that she's going to continue walking across the crosswalk. Driver plows into her regardless.
Oh my gosh. Well, my next question was going to be like, what kind of injuries, like what kind of severe injuries do you see like that you try?
Depends very, very much on the nature of the incident. For example, the case on the highway involving a physician, my client suffered an enormous internal injuries requiring surgery. The woman who struck in the crosswalk, broken leg. Fractures are quite common. And then you have, in the non-fracture category, you often have herniated discs.
I was going to say back. Seems like it'd be pretty common.
Back involvement. But the injuries can be virtually that. I had an interesting case where my client was driving with a sister. He was seated in the passenger side. They were driving down the road, and an elderly defendant blew through a stop sign and smashed into the passenger side of the car. And my client, unfortunately, had just like 2 days before had surgical reconstruction of his knee, and the accident blew up his knee again. Yeah, he had literally had his knee surgically reconstructed 2 days before.
That poor guy. That's a tough timing. That is real tough timing.
That was bad, man. Thankfully made a real nice recovery. But.
Okay, good. So tell me what a case looks like. So if somebody gets into an accident or is involved in an accident that they feel like they should be compensated for, that's not their fault, what steps should they take?
I might have referenced this in an earlier episode. Hire a reputable lawyer, and then after that occurs, somebody like me would get the police report, see what the police report says. Police report is not dispositive. It doesn't decide what happens, but it gives you some information as to what happened. Get the medical records. If there are witnesses listed on the police report, those can be a valuable source of information. You want to reach out to those folks, kind of reconstruct as best you can what happened. A visit to the scene is always important. Lots of lawyers don't actually go to the scene. I usually try and get out to the scene to actually see it.
What do you gain from that normally?
Well, you see what your client saw, and you experience what your client experienced. I recently settled a traumatic brain injury case where my client was going westbound toward a light. She was going to take a left, and she was approaching the left turn lane, and the defendant was exiting a commercial strip mall and testified in his deposition that two drivers also going westbound had waved him through, which didn't prove to be accurate. But so my client is proceeding toward the light, and this guy comes out of nowhere and just smashes into her because, bear in mind that my client is separated by 3 lanes of traffic that this guy's cutting across. And going to the scene allowed me to visualize and see that there's no way this defendant driver could have reasonably decided to cut across 3 lanes of traffic and make a left turn.
Oh, that's cool. That's something you might not have noticed had you not gone out there. What should a person not do at first? Like, is there something, sometimes you hear people say, hey, don't do this. Don't admit that. Don't do this. Like, is there something that you would tell someone, hey, just don't do this?
I always tell my clients in the early stages is don't talk to the insurance companies. Don't give recorded statements over the phone. Don't do any of that because that can and will be used against you. So that's what I always tell my folks not to do. The other important thing is I tell them not to ignore physical complaints. If you, for example, I've had clients tell me, well, I have this, I have numbness in an arm or a leg, or I have pain going down my arm or leg. I always say to them, if for nothing else, for peace of mind, figure out why that is. Because in the event that you resolve the case without knowing what that is, and you find out down the road that that's a symptom of a really serious problem that's related to the accident, you can't go back and undo it. So in order to make an informed choice and decision about your lawsuit, you have to fully understand what your injuries are before you make that significant decision. So don't ignore symptoms you're having, pains you're having. Go get them looked at by somebody in the medical field who can tell you what they are. And again, hopefully it's nothing serious, and hopefully you'll be allowed to sleep at night. But you have to know what your injuries are.
All right. So then what happens next? So someone comes to you. You guys do you check out the scene. You do the discovery. You look at the police report. What's next?
Well, usually all that's done before you initiate suit. You have all that stuff before, and then if it's a reputable insurance company, you can often put together a settlement package to the insurance company, include the police report, includes witness statements, medical records, medical bills, pictures if appropriate, and get that all to the insurance company and say, look, here's the situation. It's pretty clear that your insured driver was at fault here. Is there an opportunity to resolve this case without filing suit? Unfortunately, most of the time the answer is no. Insurance companies evaluate cases much differently than me on the plaintiff side. But I always give them that opportunity. And if that doesn't occur, then I initiate suit and put the complaint on file.
You mentioned the insurance company. So how does it change things if the person is not insured, the person that hit your client?
The person's not insured or underinsured. Great question. You have to talk to your client, find out who his carrier is. You should know that from the start anyway. And if appropriate, notify his carrier that he or she may be asserting rights under the uninsured or underinsured portion of his own policy.
Okay. So then it kind of falls on your own insurance company, which is, I suppose, a bummer because they're not going to love you very much as a client if you...
No, that's true. They're not. And folks always say to me, well, now my rates are going to go up. And I say, well, that's probably true. But quite frankly, rates are likely going to go up anyway.
Yeah, that's true, actually. That's a good point.
And you suffered a serious injury, and your uninsured or underinsured coverage may be the only mechanism by which you can recover.
You always mention the DIY representation never being a good idea in any situation. Like what would be like some of the biggest problems with trying to handle this on your own?
Wow, I could spend a lot of time on that.
I bet you could.
Well, the biggest problem is, and this is no, I'm not trying to slight folks who aren't lawyers, but if you're not a lawyer and you don't understand what your components of recovery may be, you can't really evaluate your claim. So you need to know that if you have a serious injury, that you're entitled to recover for all the pain and suffering you have occurred to date, the pain and suffering that you may occur in the future, your medical bills, your scarring, impact it's had on your activities, things you can no longer do. You need to understand fully what that is, and you also should have access to what previous cases with similar incidents and similar facts have yielded in terms of verdicts. That's something I have at my fingertips. I can get online through the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin and kind of punch in that data in Cook County, and I can come up with what juries are returning for those types of injuries and those types of accidents. Obviously, it's not a science, but I can have a range in mind as to what the potential value of this claim may be. And if you're a layman and you don't have that data, and you don't have that information, you can often agree to a settlement that's substantially less than you would likely get in the hands of a competent lawyer. I always tell folks, I understand you may want to do this on your own, and I always tell them, because I don't want to give them a hard sell. I said, listen, if you don't use me, use somebody else. Mm-hmm. But get a lawyer to help you through this. It doesn't have to be me, but it should be somebody who can guide you through this process, because you're not going to be familiar with all the ins and outs.
Can't we just use ChatGPT?
I don't think that would be a good idea. I don't think that'd be a good idea at all.
All right, let me write that down. Don't use ChatGPT for advice on law.
No, and don't Google it.
Don't Google either? Oh man, well I'm out then. Those are my only two options. So Mark, you always have great stories. I gotta believe you have some pretty good ones when it comes to automobile situations. What do you got for me? Give me a good story.
I can tell you one story. I represented a really nice young guy who had just gotten off work. He worked the late shift in the south suburbs at a factory, and he was going to get a burrito at this famous burrito stand out in the south suburbs. And it was later at night, and he was crossing the street, and out of nowhere was struck by the person who had been drinking in a nearby bar for several hours. And she hit him so hard that he popped up on her hood. And she was so intoxicated that she was driving down the street with him on her hood without knowing it. And people on the street were screaming at her to let her know that this guy was on the front of her car. Yeah, he suffered a terrible leg fracture. Because she had been drinking in a nearby bar in Illinois, if you can prove that this bar got this person intoxicated leading to my client's injury, you can sue the bar. So I sued the bar. And at trial, I called the owner of the bar, who said she had owned the bar between her and her husband, had owned the bar for 45 years, and in 45 years had never seen an intoxicated person in her bar, which, based upon the jury verdict, the jury did not believe. And additionally, this woman who had staggered out of the bar and jumped into her vehicle and crashed into my client and drove down the street with my client on her car until people alerted her. She was in the bar and she was clearly intoxicated. So that's a story that was early on in my career, and that really stuck out at me. Anybody who would own a bar for 45 years and said they'd never seen an intoxicated person, I thought that was a stretch.
Yeah, it's either the lamest bar ever, or they don't serve alcohol, or they're watering down their drinks. Interesting. Well, thanks everyone for tuning into my conversation with experienced attorney Mark P. Loftus. For more information or to connect with Mark, you can visit markploftus.com. As always, please like and subscribe. Mark, always great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Kevin, thanks so much. Appreciate it talking to you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.